So hi, my name is Kathryn Rodgers, and thank you so much to Green Science Policy for inviting me here today. This is really exciting. Yep, so Silent Spring Institute is a nonprofit research organization. We were founded over 25 years ago. We research environmental chemicals and women's health. Today, I am going to go through three different examples of connecting research to policy. These are all from my own personal experience. But Rachel Carson offers some great lessons in science communication. She was a biologist, and she's most well known for her book, Silent Spring. Silent Spring really spoke to people when it came out in 1962. Um, it captured the public imagination in the post-World War II era, and during which chemicals were becoming a part of people's everyday lives. And without understanding what that meant for people's health, for the health of nature, and how these things were connected. So her book really helped lay the social awareness and really the social movement that was necessary for the formation of the EPA and some landmark health protective policies that came later. Less than 10 years after Silent Spring was published, DDT was actually banned as a result of a lawsuit filed on behalf of nursing agricultural workers. So her book really helped to lay that foundation that made these types of policies possible. And there are so many other great scientists who have worked to create movements. Wangari Maathai she was a scientist, and she formed the Green Belt movement starting in Kenya. And Arlene Bloom is also a scientist who has connected research to different public health movements. So my examples that I'm going to talk about today show that connecting research to policy isn't linear. There isn't just one way to do it. So you have to be a little bit nimble. So I'm going to start with my first example. Preparation is key. This is my personal favorite story to tell. And it started off with sustainability managers and students on college campuses in Massachusetts wanting to purchase flame retardant free furniture for their dorms. And a Boston fire code actually for furniture relied on flame retardants. And so they weren't able to. So we sought out to ask a research question to ask, how did flame retardant levels compare in those dorms that had to meet that standard versus other types of dorms? And in all of the legwork that it took to pull together evidence from other scientists, from sustainability managers and students and firefighters, we actually provided enough evidence for the city of Boston to change their fire code before our data had actually been published. So to me, the lesson from this work was that the investment in the relationships with the people who are affected by your research can be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the data itself in producing the change. And so that, I just think that's a great story. You know, I think sometimes doing the work to invest in those relationships around a research project, it may not always be explicitly funded in your grant, but it is well worth the effort. My second example, Stay Ready, comes from my experience of once a paper is published, it does not go away. You need to keep that information close to you and keep it ready for future opportunities. So this paper was a large review of environmental chemicals in breast cancer. It was written for epidemiologists to better design studies who are studying these environmental risks of breast cancer. And at the time, we did not have a specific plan for what type of policy this paper would inform. But it continues to be well read among the research community. It's one of the top downloaded articles in the publishing journal. But last year, building on findings from another scientist at Silent Spring who had identified breast cancer organizations um, who do or do not acknowledge the environmental risks of breast cancer, led to Silent Spring scientists, along with 69 other scientists, sending a letter to the National Cancer Institute requesting them to acknowledge the risk of environmental chemicals in breast cancer in their fact sheets for patients and clinicians. And NCI wrote back, they received our letter. This is something that they have said they're going to look into to change, and we will continue to follow up on that. And in 2019, I had the opportunity to connect this breast cancer work to the firefighters that I had built relationships with the previous study in college dorm rooms. The firefighters in Massachusetts wanted to include breast cancer and cancers of the reproductive tract in the state cancer presumption law for firefighters. There was a recent case of a firefighter who developed breast cancer, and her medical benefits were not covered by the state. And so they asked for me to help lay out the evidence of firefighter exposures and their links to breast cancer. And this paper was really the basis for that letter. And that letter was a really big reason why that bill passed and was signed by the governor. I think that from this example, I'm guessing maybe I put in between 10 to 20% of the work that it took to write a paper in its post-publication life. So for press, blogs, testimony, presentations, just keeping that research alive. And my last example is the most straightforward, right? I think all of us as researchers want to, we see the literature and we're going to do things to fill gaps in literature. And you can take that same mindset and you can think about filling gaps in data that support policies, specific policies. So in this case, we're hearing flame retardant manufacturers say that flame retardants were necessary for preventing upholstered furniture fires. But the data that they were using to support that claim had a lot of limitations once we dug into it. And so we sought to give more accurate evidence of reality, of the real risks from upholstered furniture fires. And we looked at raw fire data from Massachusetts and found that upholstered furniture fires ignited by smoking materials were far more dangerous than those ignited by open flame sources. And I know that sounds kind of in the weeds, but it's actually really important for thinking about what types of standards get applied to furniture and how they are met, and if they are reliant on chemicals or not. So we shared these findings with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Someone, or maybe a few people, when we were introducing ourselves, were saying they wanted to learn more about how to connect their research to decision makers. And this was a lesson that really came from Arlene Bloom's suggestion. I actually traveled with her to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and she encouraged me. I knew that I wanted to meet with the staff members, and she encouraged me to reach out and make that meeting. And on the first trip there, I actually I met with someone who wasn't the people who I wanted to meet with. And Arlene said, "Well, then you should go back. You should go back, do it again, try again." And that's what I did. This paper is also helpful to other scientists and activists to show that furniture fires ignited by smoking materials are in fact more dangerous. So in conclusion, I want to say that connecting your research to policy, it requires an awareness of the social and political landscape at play. You really have to understand what stage that movement is in, and then you can see how your research can contribute to an existing movement, or it can help build one. And like I said, there isn't really a formula for doing this. But I will say the overarching theme, I think, is that in order to connect research to policy, it has to go through people first. So people who are affected by the research. I can't even, I was trying to think of an example, and I really can't even think of an example that I know of in which research has gone directly from the scientists to the policymakers. You really have to engage the people who it affects. That is the most effective and efficient way to actually have that line of communication reach decision makers. And I'll just reiterate from these 3 examples, I have found that preparation is key. Invest in your relationships with your researchers, with stakeholders, affected communities. Stay ready. Always be ready to use even past research that might come up again. Look for those opportunities. And then also think about policies that actually have gaps in their data, and they could be strengthened, or a new policy could be generated from data that's not currently there. So thank you so much. I look forward to your questions, and you can feel free to reach out to me anytime, or visit our website.